goal, obviously, is for everyone to do the best job they can. Productions can't make everything perfect, so you will clean up whatever's left. A scene could have, dozens of edits, and my job is to make the whole thing sound like somebody walked in with an iPhone and just started recording, even though it's made up of hundreds and hundreds of little pieces.
I use iZotope RX tools every day. There's a new wave of noise reduction stuff coming out, the 1 and 2 knob things. They're great, but it's like trying to take a dandelion down with a weed whacker. There's gonna be a lot of collateral damage. iZotope is like, you can get real precise. That's the type of stuff that you really can't live without. My name is Steve Giammaria. Everybody calls me Major. I'm a supervising sound editor and re-recording mixer and partner here at Sound Lounge in New York.
My name is Evan Benjamin. I'm a dialogue editor, re-recording mixer, and supervising sound editor at Sound Lounge in New York as well.
Sound Lounge started here in the Flatiron District of New York in 1998. We do full audio post for commercials and television and film. Recently, we've been working on The Bear, Goosebumps, Sesame Street, #1 Happy Family USA, and some spots for all the major brands. Depending on the show, the needs of the show, The Bear specifically is super dialogue intense, so Evan is one of the best dialogue editors on the planet, so I make sure I get him as much as I can.
Thank you.
Yeah, well,
We have a large crew of guys who can do different stuff, and so depending on the job we have and who's busy, different people work on different projects.
In general, we take the tracks from the picture department. Evan will clean up all the dialogue, fix any mistakes. That's where RX comes in. At the same time, the sound design folks are doing their thing, creating the world, and then it all comes together on the mix stage here and try and make it all one cohesive unit. Especially on some of these dialogue-heavy things, RX is a useful tool, especially for Evan here as the dialogue editor.
I was working on some indie film, and it was a couple in a bedroom, and I'm hearing a car alarm going off outside. And I said, let me try this thing, because I just got it, and I sort of don't know how it works. And I opened it up, and there were a bunch of orange dashes across the screen. I just drew it out, and it miraculously filled it in with tone. And then I went to the next one. I went to that, and all of a sudden, there was no car alarm. That was like an epiphany for me. That was like a sound epiphany. That totally, to me, changed the way I approached production sound.
I remember my first RX. It was a flute bleed on a microphone for Shrek the Musical, I think. Yeah. It was that same thing where I opened it up, I'm like, there's the flute. And you drew it out, and it was just like, this is a game changer.
If I'm doing dialogue editing for a normal 8-hour day, I'm probably using it hundreds of times. I consider it an essential tool. I don't know how I would work without it.
On The Bear with having Scott, who's getting us amazing stuff, Evan, fixing anything that needs to get fixed and getting it to me. I don't always know. They'll tell me after, like, oh man, this scene was like crazy to capture, crazy to edit. I'm like, oh, it seems okay to me, because they all did their jobs.
My name is Scott Smith. I'm the production sound mixer on The Bear. Me and my crew are responsible for all the on-set sound recording for the show and do our best to send in something usable to the Folsom Post.
I have an old mentor who said to me once, you can never tell the job someone did from the end result. You can only know if you knew what they start with. So if I start with great production sound, I'm going to have a great product to give to him, and then he's going to have a great mix.
I like to mix pretty dialogue forward. I want to make sure all the words are heard. I'm very spoiled. It's rare that I have to work really hard to make something sit right.
These shows are done at a pretty tight time frame, so you have to make every second count, to use a particular phrase.
The season 3 Emmy nominations just came out. Evan and I were nominated for Best Editing and Best Mixing, along with the rest of the team. You do your best on every show, and it's nice when a show hits. It's a creative show, and they think about sound. It's all in service of story, and they set us up for success really well on this show.
Our goal is always to get the best material we can from the source. The actors are, for the most part, never going to be able to duplicate some of those scenes 2 months later in some studio somewhere. So even if the sound isn't perfect, our goal is to try and get the performance.
I'm just grateful for people recognizing that you are working with a lot of very talented people, and this whole thing is just one amazing group that just seems to get better and better each season, I feel like, and it's just a joy.
especially on the Bear. You know, they do long takes outside, and there's elevated trains going by and all that stuff, and they like to keep that stuff in. They push back a lot on technical ADR, and for good reason. You know, a lot of that stuff is very hard to recreate in a studio environment. We try and avoid that as much as possible and save what's there, which is, you know, a great testament to Evan and Scott that we don't do a lot of ADR.
ADR is a process where the actor comes in months after they've been shooting and has to, without any costumes or without any other of their fellow actors around, and has to recreate the exact vibe and voice that they were in on the day when they shot it. So the actor has to come in, they're watching themselves on a screen, they're given the lines in front of them, and they have to mimic their mouth movements and say the line in sync with what they did on camera. People think it's up to the engineer or the editor to make it sound right, but I have found that very often it's 90% the performance of the actor that matters. For some actors, it's effortless, which always kind of impresses me, but for most actors, even very, very skilled actors, it's difficult.
I've sat through some films where it's been obviously ADR'd and the performance is just so antiseptic and off the mark. It literally just takes me out of the scene. In situations where we've had the opportunity to get wild lines, I'll try and get them right away. And we've been lucky in those situations. If it's a particularly emotional scene or something like that, at least the actor's in the same headspace to do it.
If RX wasn't around, you would have gone to these guys and they said, I don't want to do ADR, and you would have to say, well, you're going to have to. Now we take it as a commonplace, but it's really hard for people that don't know how miraculous some of that stuff is.
There's so many things going on set. You've got all kinds of communication devices. You've got Wi-Fi routers all over the place. You've got LED lights.
You know, season 2, they added some lights that had a whine to them, so we were able to RX a lot of that out, which was helpful. They fixed that for season 3. That's what I like about, you know, episodic TV is like we get another shot at it and we get a relationship with the production mixer. So as the Bear evolves too, as it's remodeling, all of that stuff, you know, the acoustics of the space change, and, you know, it's a constant battle. Scott's fighting on set.
The front of house for season 4, acoustically, we were actually able to put up some absorption material up in the ceiling. I didn't realize that the construction department had put it up. And I go, wow, it's really quieter in here. And it didn't even register with me at first that it was the material that we had ordered, which they never had a chance to put in last season, but it makes a huge difference.
You know, that is a working kitchen. They have to have an exhaust fan. The fridges actually run. He's been able to dial in a lot of that where he has control on set.
Yeah, that's actual cooking that's taking place on the sets. The food, for the most part, that they're preparing is all edible. That's Chris Store's sister, Coco, who's an actual chef, supervises all the preparation and oversees it. She does a great job.
In season 2, the construction kind of replaced the noisy kitchen environment for a few scenes. And right off the bat in that first scene in 201, Carmy and Sid start walking through, and there's sledgehammers going and things actually smashing through. And yeah, they were actually taking down walls.
I did not realize that they were actually going to demo the kitchen.
That was a very hard scene to do.
It wasn't that bad for me.
I figured, okay, this is going to be CGI and they're going to fake some stuff. No, they really demoed the kitchen. So I'm watching that unfold and go, well, this is going to be interesting in post.
I worked very hard on that scene because there's like a line she says that gets referenced later, and you kind of need to hear it. And right as she comes to the most important word in the sentence, there's a giant smash of some masonry. But RX, again, I was able to get out a lot of these, get around the blows that were in all this dialogue because it was just kind of crazy. Part of what makes the show special, actually, is that they fly by the seat of their pants in the best possible way. It's improvisation. A lot of other shows wouldn't have the raw material to do something like that.
Things can be kind of unpredictable on the Bear, which is just a function of the showrunner's style. He likes immediacy in the performances that they do and accidents that happen. So we don't get a lot of rehearsals. We sometimes really have no clue what's going to happen. So the best thing that we can do is guess what the actors are going to do, what the camera operators are going to do, and try and gather as much as we can. We have literally had situations where we have 6 microphones on one actor because we just don't know what's going to happen. It's kind of a guessing game. And now that we have a feel for what the actors do, what their style is, we're able to make some pretty good rough guesses as to how things might play out within a scene.
Sometimes it's the scenes that you don't expect that catch you by surprise. So there's a scene in season 4 where there ends up being, 15 people under a table?
Ultimately, what happens is Richie's daughter is freaked out about doing stepdad-daughter dance with her new stepfather who's getting married. So she goes under the table to hide out. Then Richie comes underneath the table. And before you know it, basically the whole Brazzotto family is underneath the table.
Scott knew ahead of time that this was going to be an issue. Can't get a boom in there. You can't have PZMs on the top of the table because they're going to be in there.
What we ended up doing is taking 16 lavalier mics in little shock mount foam pieces, drilling holes through the top of the table, aging them down so that they more or less blend in with the underside of the table. We could only hope that the mics would be in positions that the actors were actually going to be in. I didn't think it was really going to work that well, but what Evan ended up with in the end is 32 channels of dialogue.
The software couldn't even show me all the tracks at once. I called everybody in to come look at it. Oh, wow, good luck. And they're just like, okay, best of luck. What people have to remember is every time there's an edit, there's a new batch of 32 microphones for that one line. I think it's just a testimony to how good a job Scott does that every line was available to me. I have to go look for it, but makes great decisions even though he's working very quickly and other people probably don't have the benefit of that time.
There are scenes in The Bear where they're yelling in the kitchen, yes, chef, things like that. A lot of that we record in stereo with the hopes that that can be dropped into left and right screen channels or the surrounds just to give the viewer some sense of the kind of space that they're in.
Scott really tries to capture as much as he can on set. For that wedding episode, they were in a tent outside, so it was a large space but had fabric walls, so it was like really dead. So it was an odd sounding space. So he captured all of the extras kind of talking at a couple of different Walla levels that we were able to use as a base for that space. Walla is just kind of generic filler dialogue. He does a really good job of kind of helping us out with that sort of thing.
Maybe it's because I came out of the music world or something, but I'm always cognizant of the acoustic space that we're doing a scene in. And if that doesn't match what's on camera, it's another thing that just takes me out of the scene. And also in a lot of those situations, the actors are responding to the environment that they're in. If they later go on and do ADR in some dry studio, yeah, you can add reverb in on it and stuff, but it just doesn't always work too well.
I think my favorite and most challenging scenes so far is the episode we were just nominated for is season 3, episode 3, Doors. It has basically 2 scenes. The first scene is Marcus at his mother's funeral, which is a nice, quiet moment with some depth. The rest of the episode is a montage of the whole month of service, and it just, the repetitiveness and the slog and the chaos of that as they kind of devolve and fall apart. It was a real challenging episode. The whole thing is scored with classical music, so wrangling the dynamics of that. Classical music is very dynamic. There's people yelling, there's people crying, there's people whispering off to the side, a couple of panic attacks in there. Both my favorite and most challenging so far, for sure.
There's one like sort of RX-friendly episode I remember doing, which was in season 1 when Crummy and Richie are fighting over a giant inflatable hot dog, which sounds so stupid when I say it, but it really did happen. Imagine if you're fighting over a giant inflatable hot dog, what that does to the lav mic that you're each wearing. And I used RX and now I'm not going to say the thing sounded pristine when I was done because it was really, really bad. But if you brought those 2 guys in and ADR'd it, you'd never be able to do it. Sometimes you're at a point where you have to salvage something and it's never going to be perfect, but it's going to be at least usable. Because the actors would have come in, they would have ADR'd it, and it probably would have stunk. So one of the things that's most interesting when you start doing this work for audio people is how many sounds come in that aren't actors' dialogue that nobody wants to hear. One of the things that comes up occasionally are Dolly Creeks. So dollies allow a camera to move in or out. You see that when you watch a TV show or a movie pretty often. What nobody tells you until you start working on this stuff is that dollies make a lot of noise. Now, we can't really show you some of the scenes that I'm taking this from, but I have superimposed Dolly Creeks over my own voice, re-recorded it and made it one bit of really terrible production audio along with some terrible acting. I'm going to play this for you, and then I'm going to show you how I get a few of these creaks out with RX. I wish dollies weren't so loud. Thank God RX can help me get out most of them. So a lot of things are terrible. The creaks are happening while the actor is speaking because that's just an inevitable part of shooting that scene. What I do here usually is I have a couple of different macros I use with Keyboard Maestro, and so I use that to just get the given audio into RX. You know, if you work on this software for any length of time, it's pretty easy to spot the kind of anomalies, the stuff that doesn't look like speech. Like that's an ugly sound of some kind.
These weren't so loud.
There's a weird click.
Thank God. All right.
There are the Dolly Creeks. You guys can see them. They kind of look like this. They're very different than the speech. The speech kind of looks organic. For me, the best way is I keep instant process off. Instant process is a way of just immediately replacing the sound you don't want with sound that you do want. And instead, I find something that's relatively neutral, like this area here, and I turn off instant process. I copy a big chunk, and then I just simply go over here and I paste it. And that tone becomes part of the sound. So instead of Dolly Creeks now, you have
So loud. Thank God. RX.
under preferences miscellaneous, you see default full bandwidth paste mode 2 selection and default limited bandwidth paste mode 2 selection. The other options are, I'm sure, useful for other things, but I really just use 2 selection because when I do this, I don't want, when I say copy this giant chunk of neutral tone here and paste it over these Dolly Creeks, I don't want the new thing I insert to move everything later. I want everything to stay in sync. Now, by no means am I getting rid of all of these because that will take me a while to do, but you can pretty much get rid of 100% of those kinds of sounds. Something else that I do actually all the time is find room tone. A room tone is something that's a clear and neutral sound of the room. That's weird. Why would you do that? Because that's what makes something sound smooth and there are no jagged pieces in the sound. So that's just an essential part of dialogue editing, is being able to provide clear tone. There's something that I've used lately with RX that I find very useful. I take a lot of sounds in production sound that might not really qualify as tone. They might have breaths in them and other kinds of stuff. And I do the same thing I did with the Dolly Creeks, and I end up with an example of tone. So if I play this, 3 clips that I pulled out of a scene, together they don't sound like I could use these for fill anywhere. So we're hearing a lot of rustling, we're hearing somebody breathing. Sometimes in the scene, there's so much talking, that's all I can find. So I'm just using this as an example. But the first thing I do is I just consolidate them so it's easier to drop into RX. I drop it into RX, and here I have. So what I do is I just copy some neutral tone that I can find within this example, just copying and pasting over the parts that are noisy. And if you do this long enough and successfully enough and persistently enough, you can get clean neutral tone out of this stuff that was not that. So what started off as this now sounds like this. And that's a pretty dull thing to make empty room tone, but it is one of the hardest things sometimes to come up with in a scene where there's, again, like a lot of shouting. The bear has this stuff, and sometimes that's my only option of doing it. Something I have to do frequently on the bear is get one actor's words out of a scene, but leave the other actor's words intact. We did fake up a little thing for you. You can hear some other remarkable acting by Major and myself here in this scene we like to call I Have Feelings. I'm going to play that for you in its entirety now.
I have feelings!
I have feelings too.
Thank you. So in a situation like this, let's just say that we have the camera just on me and we don't want to hear him saying I have feelings because he's going to be saying it and the sync is a little different. So if I do this and put it back into RX, biggest problem is this S, and I think after a while you can really detect what an S looks like. It looks like that. So that's the same kind of situation as I might encounter in one of these scenes. And I'll just take, again, some neutral room tone from someplace, which would be here, and try to get rid of this S. And this is a situation where you are definitely going to mutilate the other person's line, but it works because the other person is going to be doing their take on top of it, which I'll show you in a second. So there's no more S there.
I have feelings too.
So now you have a relatively quiet,
I have feelings too.
without hearing this thing. But now we have Major. Major came in and did another take because he's such a gifted actor.
I have feelings!
He's a little loud. Major, you shouted too much. So let's try that.
I have...
So this is the take that we're actually going to use in the show, and it overlaps with my line, but now that we put them both together.
I have feelings!
I have feelings too.
So instead of hearing 2 majors saying feelings, we only have 1 major saying feelings, which I think is really all the majors we need saying feelings. Now you've avoided having both me and Major come in for ADR. That's the goal of all these kinds of things, is to try to make these things work with the production audio if you can.
I use iZotope RX tools every day. There's a scene in season 4 where Carmi and Lee are talking in the kitchen, both chewing gum, and Jeremy keeps playing with the gum wrapper. So you did a great job of separating a lot of that stuff out. And then also, of course, we add Foley of both of those things back in. Literally, my mix tech, Maeve, and I spent an hour and a half on that scene, going through and judging each gum chew to see if we wanted to keep it in, enhance it, lower it, all of that, because they were using it as part of their performance. You don't want to suck the life out of everything. Do no harm is the first rule, for sure.
I think I have the same philosophy as Major, where I want to hear the life of the track. People, I think sometimes, especially with the advent of these tools, start thinking that if they just turn the knob all the way this way, that it sounds like a voiceover and isn't that great. But this stuff is not supposed to sound like a voiceover. This stuff is supposed to sound like life. And actors act with a lot of other things besides their words, and all that stuff needs to be preserved. We have that same philosophy, and I think that's part of what makes, I think, the Bear pretty successful. But by the same token, I really hated those gum wrappers.
Well, no, it was absolutely the worst, yeah.